Hi, everybody. It's been a while. We took a little hiatus because
it's been about almost 3 weeks since our last podcast.
3 weeks, really?
About 2.5 weeks.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we took a little bit of a hiatus just to kind of, as everybody's, I'm sure, feeling emotionally drained and quite chaotic right now. And there's a lot of stuff that we had to get in order and get our lives together and get everything sorted because I was furloughed. Last Friday was my last official paycheck. So as of this week and next and indefinitely, I'm furloughed. So that means no paycheck, filing for unemployment insurance, and really kind of like having to come to Jesus with myself on what does my future look like for my career. And, you know, like I said, the last couple of weeks have been quite chaotic, lots of ups and downs. And the first couple of days were super dark and, you know, lots of like waking up okay and then an hour later crying for hours and just not being able to like shake the sadness. And
I believe we've sat down and to actually record a podcast about 3 times.
Yeah.
Since our last one. And it's just been the same sort of where we're not in the right headspace to fully even comprehend what's going on. Or it's like, screw this, screw that, screw everything.
It's just too negative to even have one. Yeah. And I think like for those of you listening that know me very well, I've always associated my identity with my career. And that's been something that's kind of plagued my soul and also been my success driver for a long time. And, you know, when you have a great partner, they're able to like kind of shed some light on your inner workings and whether it's, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. Don was sharing that with me, you know, well into our first couple of weeks of knowing each other. He called that out about me. And I was like, yeah, you're totally right. That is something that, you know, I wear on my sleeve very much. My career and my status of my career has always been kind of like my forward-leaning approach in any sort of social setting or relationship. So,
where do you think you get that from?
I think I grew up with a very hardworking, dedicated father, and my mom works very hard in a different format, in a different setting, and they just drilled it in us kids to like make sure we went to college and make sure we get a degree and make sure we get a good job and make sure you earn good money. And like that has just been something that has literally been like, you know, very drill sergeant into us as young kids. And the idea of not making money to me was never an option. So, I mean, I even had jobs, you know, I'm sure you worked a lot of jobs when you were younger too, but I think for me it was like just I was so proud of myself when I graduated and from college because we were the first generation in our family to do that. And then also I was so proud of the fact that I paid for it by myself. And there was just this self-righteousness of me feeling like, fuck man, I came from nothing and I have this now, sure. You know, and then another thing I think that really made me like that was that I always seemed to find a way to make more money in the sense of being assertive with my leaderships and going and saying, hey, no, I deserve this and fighting for myself. And in the beginning, and then in the end, or, you know, in the latter part of my career, it would just get thrown at me. Like I was so fortunate where I would go into a review and they'd be like, here's an extra 10%. I'm like, what? I didn't think I was getting anything, but thank you. So that happened quite frequently as my career progressed. And I think for me, it was such like a status for me. Like it was such a like, I got my gold coins, you know, my gold bars in the video game or whatever you want to call it. But like for me, that was just like what defined me. And, you know, obviously as you meet your partner and have children, other things start becoming very pivotal and defining for you. But for me, man, like still, I'm still still an echo chamber in my brain of like, you got to be successful and there's no other option.
Yeah. We've talked about it several times on this podcast about kind of your work ethic and your family's work ethic. And I was always kind of wondering what it was that drove you to where, your identity was your job.
Yeah.
And obviously I can relate to that in a sense of being in the military. Like, being in the military is an identity within itself.
Sure,
and then the people you hang out with.
All your friends,
and all we talk about is work when we hang out.
There's a lot of Niners being thrown around.
Even when we're, drinking at the bar, whatever, it's all just work.
Acronyms.
Work. I mean, we don't really have a whole lot else going on other than work. Mm-hmm. And so I can understand it to that point, but it's the way that you identify with work is different because you don't hang out with your coworkers.
Yeah.
And you don't sit around and just talk work all the time. Mm-hmm. You just go to work, you bust your ass, and then you come home and
bitch to you for 4 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's part of that.
Don's like, I'm so glad this happened. I'm the happiest I've ever been in months. No, I get what you're saying. Like I genuinely couldn't define one thing that's made me like this. I think there's several factors that have made me like this. My sister's a little less heavy on the, defining herself through her career. And I think my brother's probably a little bit more like that too. But my sister seems to have a little bit more of a balance with like work life and
oh, you're saying your brother is more like you are.
Yeah. My brother is very definitive of his career and his characteristic. And
yeah, Heidi
he's
definitely
forward-leaning in his career.
Heidi definitely identifies herself through her hobbies and her interests.
Yes,
kind
100%.
of like
where my interests and hobbies have fallen by the wayside to my career.
Yeah, your hobbies are work.
Yeah. And my dad always kind of said to me, like, hey, be careful, kid. Like, you don't want to, put your entire life into that because they're not loyal to you and they're not going to be there for you when you're crying and when the world collapses. And here we are. The world has collapsed, and the first person to kick me out on my ass was my company. And to be honest, we always, we've referenced a couple of times, Tony saying, pay attention to how people treat you and how your employers treat you right now. And that sure couldn't be more accurate right now for me and for how I felt and you have felt about how my company has handled this situation. And it just continues to be a circus. Like,
So let's talk about kind of the weeks leading up to.
Well, that's what I was going to get
into. Yeah, because I think. So first of all, since I've known you, you've made it through, I don't know, 15 rounds of
probably
layoffs.
more, yeah.
And so the various companies that you go through, because, the clothing industry is very volatile and your big accounts, getting big accounts, losing big accounts.
Yeah.
Personnel shift, getting bought out, change of ownership.
Oh, we could have an entire podcast on my career path, dodging, bobbing, and weaving.
And we should.
Terrible times. But
so, yeah. So there's always been, I just want to kind of preface before you get into like leading up to these couple of weeks, you've always had a little bit of anxiety of always
PTSD,
fearing for your job.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you've always done so well is made yourself irreplaceable.
Yeah.
Or at least, as much as you can as an employee, right? Like without being the owner of a business, anybody's replaceable. But you're always like, okay, here come layoffs. I'm ready for it as much as you can be. Hustle. Whew, made it through that one. And then for me, in my optic, it's like, Holly, what are you worrying about? You always make it through. You're doing this, you're doing that. They can't lose you. Like, what are you doing? So this time, as before the pandemic ever hit, you were worried about it, and it was,
Yeah, we were having a tough year as a company.
Yeah. And so I was very much like, Holly, stop, breathe, relax. It's not gonna, they're not going to do layoffs. It's fine. You'll make it through this. And then the pandemic hit. And then it was mandatory, shelter in place, nobody at work.
Non-essential. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I definitely, it stems from a couple things. It stems from the fact that I have defined my state of being and happiness around my career. But it also comes from that PTSD or that fear of losing my job. It came from when I first moved out here. I got the best first job I could get while I was interning at Billabong. And at that time, internships were not paid. So I had to hustle. I had 4 jobs, and one of them paid well. And that one main income that I was receiving, I was working at I was working at Prime Media, and I was actually working in like Eurotuner and Super Street magazine selling ads. And we all know that like the magazine companies have just like plummeted in the last decade or so. And so I was kind of already like in a dead end spiral industry. But I was hanging on to the idea of maybe working for Snowboarder or one of the snow magazines. So anyways, I got laid off from that job. It's the first and the only job I've ever been laid off at. And I knew it was coming because the industry was crumbling and I was just a nobody. I was literally fresh out of college. They were paying me like $15 an hour. So of course I was like bottom of the barrel. They took us into a room. But the thing that shook me was I was in that room with people who had dedicated their entire lives to this company. And so here I am, like a nobody, looking across the table at someone who literally eats, sleeps, and breathes those magazines for 35 years. And that shook me. Like they were crying, and there were grown men and grown women in there crying, and it was horrible. And I went home, and I was having a hard time that year anyways for other reasons. But I called everybody I knew and went to work the next day and hustled as a cold caller and made a fuck ton of money cash. And so that feeling of holy crap, I might not be able to pay my bills. I have $800 a month in student loans. I just moved to California. I have no place to live because my parents just split. So I can't go home. And I'm doing air quotes because there was no home. My mom didn't have a house. My dad didn't have a settled house yet. So for me, there's always been this like fight or flight with my career. So from that little moment of like, holy shit, I never want to experience this again, has kind of caused a little bit of PTSD in me about getting laid off potentially. And then obviously defining myself through my successes has also been the crumbling, crippling, emotion that makes me so fearful of that thing or that moment. So I have to say, when it happened last week, not laid off, but I'm furloughed, which for those of you who don't know the difference, because it is really stupid and confusing, but furloughed means if they decide to open up next week, I still have a job. Now, whilst furloughed, they can change ownership, leadership, contracts. They can do anything they want, essentially. And so that's what's happening. So this week, I found out that the CEO was asked to step down or quit. Obviously, there's a lot of terminology wrapped nice in a bow around that. And then, coincidentally, a new CEO and a new president have been put into place. So, incidentally, everybody who used to kind of be in the executive crew is now going to probably be shook up a little bit. And it's definitely going to directly affect me in some way or not.
Yeah, so you left your job. Basically you got the phone call. Mm-hmm. Hey, your services are no longer needed, just not needed right now.
You're currently furloughed due to no fault of our own. Yeah, it's all because of this stupid virus.
Here's what furloughed means to you. You're still an employee. If we open the doors, you
still get benefits.
You're expected to come back to work.
Yeah.
However, you're just not getting paid in the meantime.
Yeah. Yeah. And some people who've been there for, 10 years, they have 5 weeks of vacation. They're fine. Right. Or, there's several people who are set up just fine, and come to find out there's actually some people who are still on the payroll who it's interesting. But anyways, so I had a pretty rough week, and I think everybody did. And it was one of those things where you couldn't really call to complain to somebody because everybody was going through it. So it was just mass chaos in everybody's lives in some form or another. Obviously, there's still a lot of people out there who are working, which they're blessed. And
but you're not talking about like you couldn't call your friends at work because they were laid off. It was literally every single person that you've ever worked with in the industry, minus a couple onesie twosie people.
No, not even them. Everyone's furloughed now. I mean, it's literally decimated the fashion industry, and I'm not really sure if innovators will even thrive at this point. Like, it used to be kind of like you innovate or die, and now it's even like the innovators are struggling. So, and it's going to shake up everything down to even social media. So we used to use influencers to promote our businesses because it was free marketing, or not free, but more affordable and more lucrative means of marketing. And you got to think about it. Like, influencers make money by selling stuff. And if there's no website to buy the stuff or no store to shop the stuff, there's no consumer purchase happening. There's no consumer transaction.
Yeah, the consumer doesn't have
what
money
good is
to
an
buy
influencer?
Stuff. Yeah.
So now even these rich influencers who have been living off of Instagram cash, they're done. Like, literally, not an industry is not subjected to this right now, either in a thriving way, but in a chaotic thriving way, or in a completely decimated way. It's just touched every single level of society. And I think that's what's more shocking to me than anything about this. And I also have to say that, I do think a lot of us have drank the Kool-Aid, in the sense that we're all sitting around going like, everyone's an idiot for leaving their house, everyone needs to stay home. And while I agree with the fact that obviously we don't want to contaminate people who are at high risk, I also think, to what expense? Like, we have lost everything in the last 2 weeks, and people are not going to get back up on their feet anytime soon and start going back to work with regards to what I'm hearing. So it's, to me, like, I keep reiterating what Donald Trump said, like, the cure cannot be worse than the virus. And right now, in my perspective, what it's doing to the economy, what it's doing to middle America, what it's doing to all of the socio classes are going to just sink down one level. So the super, super rich are now just super rich. And then the middle class is now going to be, low class, middle class. I don't know.
I think it's going to hit everybody, and it's going to hit everybody really, really hard. I mean, I don't see a way that this doesn't send the economy into a depression.
Mm-hmm. It's already there. I mean, I don't think that
a depression. And obviously, don't quote me on this because I'm not an econ major, but I believe it's defined by three negative quarters in a row.
But on the stock?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like the economy as a whole is hitting 3 negative quarters. Now, I can't remember from my econ class, but so that's just like the book term. Mm-hmm. But
that's also if you define the economy by the stock market. I mean, if you look around, like, there's people struggling all over the world, and the stock market is still like 19,000 on Dow. So I don't know.
So what I'm saying is that people who had a safety net in their 401k.
Oh, for sure.
That's like people
decimated
who are in their 20s, like, okay, fine. 30s, okay, fine.
Retirement,
40s. Yeah. But if you're in your 60s, if you're in your 70s or 80s right now, I mean, that could be, that could be the difference between you having a house or you not having a house, or being able to pay for your medical bills or not. And and right now, that stock market may never recover in your lifetime.
Yeah, I also think it's really interesting, like, the way that they're thinking of things, like the way that the stimulus was even broken up. For example, it's like, oh, well, if you make a certain amount, therefore you get you don't need this stimulus. Well, I'm sorry, but just because someone makes over 150K doesn't mean they need a stimulus less when they lose their 150K.
Right.
You need it more because my lifestyle lived up to such, right? So
Yeah.
like, if I'm not saying that everyone should spend everything they make, but when you make 150K, you can have a comfortable living, and therefore you should.
Right.
And most of us did, right? So when you have a comfortable lifestyle and you're living within your means, but you're also living up to the means in which you provide, when all of that means got taken away from you
Sure.
because the government literally said you cannot go to work, how could the government then ever take away your house or take away how could they ever justify taking anything away from any of us because of this?
Yeah.
That's where I'm
Absolutely.
like, what's it going to be,
Absolutely,
man? Is it going to be a total wipeout of debt? Like, what's it going to be?
Well, I mean, you and I have talked about this 100 times, but since this whole thing's happened, but they can't take everybody's house.
They took our jobs. You can't take our houses too.
What was it? 6.2 million people filed for unemployment in the past week.
Yeah.
They're not going to put 6.2 million families
No, I mean,
out on the street.
But goes back to my point that I was making about the cure being worse than the virus. Like, there's more suicides happening right now than there are people dying of COVID-19. Like, don't you think that is worse than just getting the virus? Like, in a sense, it's just odd to me that the reaction and the trickle effect of this and how fast it all happened. I think that's the other thing, and the speed at which it just decimated. Usually there's a little bit of like a grieving period and warning sign. This was just literally like a terrorist attack, like boom, bombed, gone.
So I've been thinking about kind of some of the reasons and why a lot of that's happened and why it's happened so fast. And, part of it is because in 2020, we're all a part of this woke nation.
Yeah, for sure.
And everybody's so conscious and so cautious.
Yeah.
Of everybody's
Saying,
thoughts and feelings and what they're doing. And so when they're like, hey, there's a pandemic, everybody's like, that's it. Everybody close it all down.
Yeah.
Like we'll just open it up in a year and everything will be fine. Like thank God that I'm in the military and I'm still going to get paid through this whole thing, and we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But could you imagine being that mom that literally doesn't have another source of income?
No, I know. Yeah.
Or say that mom is self-employed.
Yeah.
She can't file, I think this stimulus is different to where they can apply for disability, but they go from making whatever they were making to then making
half, or not even
$400 a week.
Yeah, it's a quarter.
$600 bucks.
$400 a week. Yeah, that's poverty. I don't even know like how they could think someone who made 150K could live off of $400 a week, like without losing everything.
I mean, who other than like high school students can live off $400 a week?
Yeah.
Obviously, that could be just me being completely ignorant.
No,
but
it's true. And especially with the way that housing prices are in California, like I think poverty in California is like 50K.
Yeah.
So, like just put that in your pipe and smoke it. So $400 a week is not 50K. Like,
totally.
That's the thing. Like your sub poverty levels for subsidies, and our infrastructure is built as it's built in a weak concept. But outside of that, I think we could go round and round about how fucked it all is and how mentally draining it has been. And I kind of had a little pep talk with my brother the other day, and in such, I kind of took some of my own advice because, when he's a creative and I'm a creative, and so we have a lot in common in that sense. And when you just are trying to deal with covering your mortgage and covering your rent on his building that he owns or that he runs, and, covering the employees' costs and payments and such, like, how could you sit down and be creative? Like, how could you possibly get out from the burden of the responsibilities and then whip out some creative bullshit, And I said, look, here's the thing. Like, in these times, creativity actually runs rampant. And you have to see that. You have to see that there's opportunity. In dark times, there's tons of opportunity. There's tons of little beams of light. And sometimes you're in so much darkness, you can't see anything. But you know how like when you come out of a really dark room and you can't see for like 20 minutes and then all of a sudden you can see everything perfectly clear and you're like, how the fuck could I not see that 10 minutes ago? That's how I feel about this whole thing. Like that's the best way I can describe this. Where like I was in a dark room for about 2 weeks and then all of a sudden these little beams of light started shooting through my life. And, spending more time with my kids, spending more time with my husband, spending quality time where I'm not like checking my email every 10 seconds because that's how my quality time was before. And, not feeling anxious about the circus that I was leaving every night because that's what it was. It was a fucking circus and there's drama and he said, she said, and just it was a horrible, toxic environment. And I had an hour and a half commute sitting in traffic and dealing with people honking at me and dealing with my car breaking down and all sorts of other various things that just are draining to a human. So taking all those things and compartmentalizing them and going, okay, wait a second, like there are little beams of light in this moment, and finding out that, this side hustle that we've had for 2 years now, that we've just been, 3 years. Okay. Yeah. We've just been like shoveling hats around and t-shirts around. And, that's been our forte because I'm an artist and Don's got a lot of connections. So, you've been basically the business and I've been the creative on that business for the last 3 years. And it's been good. It's been like incrementally growing, but not at the rate that it really deserved to be growing.
Well, to be honest, we just didn't have the time. Yeah. We're both working full-time jobs. We're both dedicated to our jobs. It's not like when you're there, you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So, when you're at work, you're at work.
Yeah.
And so this would be, from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. type of job.
Yeah.
And now we're having time to dedicate to it.
Yeah, for sure. So back to my point, I got a little bit on a rant there, but when I said to my brother was, hey, look, man, like the best songs I've ever heard came from the worst times. Like think about all the badass music we still listen to from the Vietnam War. And all the amazing music that came out of depressions and hard, gritty moments, character building bullshit, right? Like as much as it sucks to walk through that fire, you walked out of that fire and you might be a little bit burned, but your soul's still intact and you got a lot to say. And I said to my brother, particularly around his field of work, but I said, look, to be honest, like there's a lot of lollipop bullshit that's been coming out of the music industry in the last decade. And think about how amazing this is to actually have something to write about. Like have some grit, have some soul, have some volume in your words that make people cry and because I mean, I've listened to a couple songs where I'm just like, oh my gosh, I start crying right now because everybody's so much more in tune with their emotions because they're all over the place.
Think about.
Yeah. They're all over the place. But that brings up another point. Like what else do you have to think about? Because the reality of it is, to your point about the woke culture that we've been living in, it was bound to break. And
yeah, you can't be so in tune and understanding and listening
sensitive,
to
yeah.
And sensitive of everything that's going on around you and be able to service everything.
Right.
Well, and so I'm not saying that people who are taking the disease serious are fucked up because they're woke. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's that if this disease would have rolled out in the 1970s, 50s, 40s, whatever decade you pick, they would have yayyed it for a lot longer and shut things down, which of course could have had more devastating results as far as the impact. But basically they were like, oh, there's a disease. What's it do? We're not really sure yet. Shut down the country. Shut it down. And that's, I mean, how fast that went from, I mean, a significant portion. I can't remember what unemployment rate is at today. It's like 3% or, you know, but 6.2 million Americans thought they had job security, thought they had, you know, careers, some that they've invested decades into.
Yeah.
And then after 2 weeks could possibly never be able to work in that field again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's people like me that I'm young, I'm nimble, I'm creative, I'm innovative. I think about a lot of crazy ideas and I put to action a lot of crazy ideas. There's a lot of people are on their last leg of their career or getting out of the military, or, you know, there's a lot of people in getting out of college and they have $150,000 worth of student loan debt and there's no career to walk into right now. So there's a lot of people way worse off than I am. And I think that's what I kept having to kind of like preach to myself over the last couple of weeks, because it is dark. You know, you get into a moment and you can't get your head out of it. And there was one day where I just couldn't get out of it, couldn't snap out of the sadness. And we went outside for a walk, and about 10 minutes into the walk, I just like, I always kind of describe it as just like a veil, just kind of like went over, and I was like, oh, I feel good. I feel happy. I'm okay. I can do this. We can do this. And you've been such an amazing, you know, optimist and helping me, kind of like coaching me. And when you look at your partner and they're upset, that just makes you spiral, because you're like, we're doomed, you know, and you've been so amazingly stoic. And I always kind of like bashed you for that, because I was like, God, you're so empathetic and stoic about everything. But I need you to be stoic right now, because I'm so emo that like your stoicness about how it like, we're going to be fine. We'll be fine. We'll be fine has helped bridge that time for me to mourn, to get back on the fucking saddle and hustle. And that's what this week has been. So starting Monday, I was literally a telemarketer Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this week, and Thursday. Thursday started to kind of actually reap what I sowed a little bit. And we just decided that, you know, we found out, let me back up. We found out last Friday night, that we were able to sell medical PPE through our side business, Way Collective.
Personal protective equipment. So masks,
gowns,
goggles, surgical gowns or medical gowns,
hand sanitizer,
like, glove, all of the things
that people can't get.
Nobody can buy right now, because where they would normally buy it is out. Mm-hmm. So sometimes construction companies or painting companies would just go to Home Depot to get it. They can't, because they're not selling it anymore, because they're putting it all to the hospitals. Mm-hmm. And then some of these hospitals, their supply chain is maxed out and they're not able to get it either.
Yeah.
So what we found out is that we have suppliers that can provide it. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of time and dealing with it. So.
Yeah, like typically a supply chain manager is in charge of making sure that they have product or supplies, especially in the medical field. Like part of OSHA is making sure your employees are protected. And so it's actually like in California specifically, it's really, really important that companies have all of this equipment for their employees. And you typically buy for a certain time period based on historics and data and analytics, and it's all pretty clean. Like I used 30,000 masks last, March, so I'm going to buy 35 this year because we have more beds, right? So, but I mean, this is just like they're burning through masks faster than they can order them, and the lead times are longer than any of us would like. So that's been kind of like our new learnings, and to be really honest, going from slinging bikinis to slinging surgical masks was never really something I thought we'd be doing. But here we sit, and to be really honest, it's kept my mind really active, and I didn't make a buck all week, not $1, and put a lot of time and a lot of energy, and hopefully we have a pretty solid lead that we can seal the deal Monday morning, and we got our first sale. So, and hopefully many more to come. So it's looking up, and my spirits have raised a bit, and so have Dawn's. And I think ultimately what shook for me this week was knowing that there's something that I can do that will provide shelter and food and all the necessities for our family. And that just kind of drove me all week. And then hearing the news later this week about the new CEO and new leadership at my old my old, see, that's psychological, Freudian slip, but at Manhattan Beachwear was kind of like, I think it's just a really emotional thing for me, because there's so many mornings that I would drive to work and look up in the sky and just say, God, I know you have a plan for me, and I know this isn't it. So please act now.
Yeah.
Do it now, bro.
When it first kind of happened, I was joking with you, and, if whoever's listening, please don't, take offense to this, but I was joking with Holly and saying that God sent Corona just for you to move on.
Yeah.
And
to get out of my bad situation.
Of course, I'm not trying to make light of any of that stuff, but what we were talking about today, and obviously it's we were in a little bit of a break today, and so we were sitting down at the table having lunch, and I was just thinking, this is exactly what you needed to kind of take a break, and what better time than now, where you can literally not pay on your mortgage. You can not pay on your cars. You can not pay on whatever if you can't, and it's okay. And it's
because nobody else is either.
Nobody's doing it, right? So you have 3 months to figure it out. And so if we're going to hustle, now's the time. If you're going to go out on your own, now's the time. If you're going to,
reinvent yourself in any way. Yeah.
When else are you going to
read more books, go back to college, go be a lawyer, go take a, real estate course. Like, I think that's the message that I definitely want to share with our friends and family, or whoever's listening, strangers, whoever it might be. I think that's the message I really clearly want to define, is that I know there's a meme going around right now, something about like, make sure that during this time, the stuff that you go back to is actually like prioritized for you. Like, what is it that you want to go back to your new normal, right?
Yeah.
Like, is your old normal what you want to go back to? And I know for myself, and I know several of my friends that feel like, fuck, no, it isn't. Like, we were literally grinding down to a toothpick mentally. Yeah. And that's just not a way I want to live. And we've shared this several times, where like the burden of owning a home in California can be very cumbersome. So having to have that high salary and having to commute in order to get that became like an only option for us for a while. And I just felt so stuck and so morbidly depressed by it. Yeah. And, it really started to fuck with my sanity, especially in the last 6 to 7 months. It's been pretty dark in the Swope household. And you've always helped me, Dawn. You've always kind of like been like, Holly, snap out of it. And you give me grace to be in it. And then you're like, you said something the other day about like, you can go to that dark place, or you can let that dark place visit you. Just don't go there, or something. You said.
Well, I was like, you can go visit, but you still got to come home.
Yeah. Don't let that dark passenger come with you.
No camping.
Yeah. So anyways, I just want to commend you. And I think like sometimes when you go through really, really tough times, relationships get strained and marriages don't last. And so I think that's probably going to be a huge factor with regards to failed relationships or marriages right now. And I am encouraged by the reality that instead of that, we're thriving together, and we're, not to say that on Friday when we worked together side by side, you weren't like, I fucking can't work with you, you unorganized piece of shit. You didn't say that, but yeah, like we just work differently. Don's like very meticulous and organized, and I am a designer. I'm a creative. So like I know where everything is. But if someone had to come and
I look at your desktop,
in, like, yeah,
your desktop on your computer, and I get anxiety.
Yeah,
it's
bad.
It is insane, but
I know where everything is.
Yeah, you have that organized chaos going on, and just to kind of give my side of that whole situation. I am not worried about what you're gonna do. You know what I mean? Like, you're not a person that I have ever had to wake up and say, like, what are you going to do today? Or, I mean, are you even like,
are you going to get out of bed, you lazy ass?
Like, so.
Oh, well.
So
there's been days I didn't want to get out of bed. Let me put it that way. But we have children, we have little humans you have to smile for.
And so when we found out that, you were getting furloughed, before we knew that the government was going to do everything that they were going to do, before we knew banks were going to, allow people to, who are affected by COVID and the furloughs and all that stuff to miss payments. It's like, okay, if we have to sell the house, fine.
Yeah.
This is just a thing. Mm-hmm. All I care about is my family.
Yep.
And if we have to pick up, move, and figure it out somewhere else, that's what we'll do.
Yeah.
And if we have to reduce everything down to a freaking motorhome just so that
as long as we have each other,
just so that we can be happy,
yeah,
then that's what we'll do.
I'll tell you what, though, dude, that
I don't care about any of this stuff.
I know.
mean, I love it. It's everything that we've worked for. I'm proud of it. Mm-hmm. I enjoy it, of course. But if I have to leave it all tomorrow.
Yeah. But let me throw something at you and see if you get it. This analogy is like, when you're playing a sport, and let's say it's just it's a two-man, like let's say you're playing tennis, right? And you're playing doubles. If you're amazing and I fucking fail, that's the worst feeling in the world. To know that, like, you still have a job. You still can cover your portion of the mortgage. I now can't. If we have to lose this entire house because I can't provide, that would crush me. And, I think that's where I was kind of like feeling the weight of the pressure of like, your job's stained. You're never going to lose your job. But that's why I always kind of was hyper paranoid about that, because we do need both of our incomes to provide the shelter and this amazing, amazing oasis we've built for ourselves. But the reality of that is like, you don't ever want to be the shittiest person on the doubles team. Like, you don't want to be the loser on that doubles team.
That's a good. It is a good analogy, but
yeah.
But here's the flaw.
Like,
in that.
Even though there's comfort in knowing you're saying like, we will be okay if we shelter in place in a fucking tent. We will be okay, Holly, as long as we have each other. But
so here's the flaw in that is that that's assuming that you never got a job doing anything ever again.
Sure.
And
sure.
And so when I say, like, I'm not worried about it, we'll figure it out, we'll make it happen, it's fine. It's because I know you.
Yeah.
And I know that you're going to get out and you're going to hustle and you're going to make it work. And, whether that's developing our business or setting off on your own and doing, freelance work, landing at another company, staying with your current company. Like, you have so many options.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm like, we're fine.
Right. I totally agree with you. I think to build on that a little bit further, I think actually working for one company has been the dumbest thing I could have ever done over the last decade, because I'm now seeing I can service in so many different ways. I could be making 4 times what I was making because I can be a service provider and as a consultant to multiple different avenues. Doesn't have to just be in swimwear. I could be, doing tech packs for a denim company in LA and from my office at home. Like, I could be so much more than what I am. at one place. I could be selling surgical masks and designing denim, or you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
And I was always just kind of like, I'm a manager of bikinis. I'm a manager of designers. And I just I was in such a tunnel, and you've kind of helped me see, like, there's so much. And I actually had a doctor tell me this. This is when you know you are fucked up. I had a doctor. I was at my final visit after I had Remy, and I was like, do I want to go back to work? I don't really want to go back to work yet. I'm kind of not ready to go back to work. I just had this beautiful little baby. We're not having it anymore. It's my last baby. I just wanted to like milk it for as long as I possibly could, because I knew the feeling of going back with Merrick. With Merrick, I was naive, so I had no idea. With Remy, I knew better. And she was like, well, what are you so stressed about going back? Like, what is it about going back? Like, it seems like this is a really bad place. Like, you shouldn't be this stressed about going back to your job. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I kind of just shared with her like a little bit of what was happening at the time. And she was like, let me tell you something, honey. There is a million jobs out there. You do not have to stick with this one job. You do realize that, right? And she like put her hand on my lap at that point.
Yeah, she's like,
you're an idiot.
She's like doctor friend, doctor therapist at that time.
And I was like, well, I know, but you know, I work in this one industry and it's very niche and it's blah, 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 blah. And she just reiterated it. And she's like, there's hundreds of millions of jobs out there. You can do anything. You don't have to just do that. And I was like, she doesn't get it, you know?
Yeah.
And honestly, until just now, sitting here talking with you, her words fell on my deaf ears. And now I'm like, oh, she was so right. Like, there's just so much more opportunity out there. And some days are bad. Some days, you know, like, I'm not going to lie. Like, this week fucking blew. I called and called and called. I got bitched at on the phone. I've got rude people telling me like, why are you even calling us? You should be donating these. And I mean, I've had 1,000,001 different things kind of thrown my way this week. And, you know, some of it was bad. Some of it was great. And at the end of the week, I felt discouraged because I was like, fuck, I just worked a 40-hour work week. Actually, probably more. And I didn't make one penny, you know?
Yeah.
So Aunt Patty helped a lot by just kind of saying like, hey,
she's
you're
been amazing.
sowing the seeds. She's been a huge mentor to ours. Yeah.
A mentor, but I mean, most of all, patient.
Yeah, she's very patient. And a friend. She's been my friend for years. And now she's, you know, like,
but she's been
a
like
professional mentor.
Just very understanding and encouraging and patient and all that stuff.
I called her one day. Thursday, I called her and I was like, Patty, what the fuck? I can't do this. This is nuts. Like, A, I don't really know what I'm doing. And B, I just jumped into the fucking lion's den on this. And she's like, it's so crazy. I got to take the day off. I can't do this either. Like, da, da, da. So it was so funny. I was calling her for encouragement and she was feeling it too. Like, even the most well-versed in this industry are starting to feel like shook a bit by this state of play. So, and for those of you listening who don't really understand what I'm saying, like, the prices in China right now are fluctuating by the hour. So you'll get a quote, you'll go out to a huge person, like a huge hospital, and you're just starting this business with this huge hospital. So you don't want to look like a dick. So you give them a quote, we get everything wrapped up, and there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of logistics and bureaucratical bullshit that all the red tape is being cut right now. So they're just like jumping off of all of their stuff and skipping the lines and going straight to wire transfers at this point to get product. And you get it. And then they're like, oh, by the way, it went up 50 cents. And we're like, no. It didn't go up 50 cents. You quoted me this 2 hours ago. It's taken me 2 hours to get the paperwork filled out. There's no way. And Patty was going through the same thing. And then I called a vendor and he was like, this is the fucking craziest shit I've ever experienced.
Yeah, like
everybody was losing it.
When you're saying it went up 50 cents, it went up 50 cents on a $1 item.
Yeah, cost.
You know, or like,
and then I have to make a margin on it.
Yeah, it's not the fact that it went up 50 cents on a $100 item. It's like you doubled the price, or you added a third of the price. And so,
and we're already offering bare dollar, margins. Like, we aren't making huge margin on these products. So, we're just like trying to make ends meet, but it's one of those things where you just get to a point where you're like, okay, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Should I keep going? Should I stop? And that's kind of where Patty was at on Thursday. And honestly, that's where I was at Thursday too. I was like, this is crazy. I did not sign up for this. And then you just hustle a little bit more because you're like, gosh, there's all these opportunities though. So I think I'm going to keep going. If I could just make 4 more calls, maybe those 4 more calls will settle the deal, you know? And so that's what I did. And then Friday woke up to like bing, 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 bing in the inbox. And, you know, some of them didn't net out and some of them did. And so we'll see. Monday's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's going to be game on next
Well,
week.
yeah, it's like I think I compared last week to kind of working on the New York Stock Exchange floor.
It was very much, yeah.
You know, it's like taking bids, checking the stocks, taking bids, you
Yeah.
know, selling, buying, trading, all of that stuff. It just netted to zero, though.
Yeah.
And so some of it's discouraging, some of it's not. But, you know, at the end of the day, whether this is the forever job, I mean, if this is what it's like in the worst case, most, you know, stressful case, we're surviving, you know? And then when it slows down, we have time to figure it out and be creative and, you know, kind of expand into the spots we want to be in rather than the spots we have to be in, which, you know, that's nice. But I think the biggest thing is that this, you know, our side hustle, which I don't think we should call it a side hustle anymore because it's the hustle.
The main hustle, yeah.
But that will allow you the freedom to maneuver however it is you want to, whether that's a new business, whether that's freelancing, whether that, you know, is just being home.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. I hope there's going to be a lot of little shining moments and pinging lights. And I don't know. I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of really great people that I've connected with and amazing friends that I have that still work in the industry and might utilize me down the road some way and somehow in some fashion. And, you know, if it doesn't all work out, it doesn't work out. And at least I have the hustle. And I think that's the thing that's comforting me right now is knowing that I could have multiple hustles and still make ends meet and not necessarily need to rely on working for somebody else. So that's been kind of like the narrative of the last week or so for us. And yeah, I mean, encouraging moments in these really wicked times. And I definitely think that when you're comfortable and when everything's really hunky-dory, you tend to focus on non-essential things and not important things. And I think that's why we got so woke, because we were just picking on bullshit at that point in lives to have something to talk about and have something to share. And the reality is, like, when you're really going through it and really going through something really hard, like, you don't have time to be woke. Like, I genuinely think with how stressed everybody is right now, like, the last thing you're concerned about is if a comedian hurts somebody's feelings on, you know, Dave Chappelle, for example. Like,
Yeah.
really? He brought humor to our lives. Is that really what you want to pick on right now? And I think, like, the whole narrative of how people think and see things is going to shift. And we quoted this to my brother the other day too, like, hard times. I can never remember the damn thing, but it's something about, like, good times breeds weak men breed good times, or hard times breed strong men. Oh, here it is. Hard times breed strong men breed good times breed weak men. And then you cycle back around. And right now...
Yeah, it's hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times.
Yeah, so right now, we just came off the weak men. And I think we're on our way through some hard times. And whether these hard times last for a couple of months or a couple of years, like, no one knows. And that's killing a lot of people too. I had a talk with a bunch of girlfriends tonight, and the planners and us all, whether it be planning for your kid's future or planning for your husband, your future, or whether it's planning your wedding or whatever it might be that you need to be planning, those plans are fucked.
Yeah.
And, specifically when it comes time to having children and being a parent and being socially responsible for having raised amazing humans, right now is a really scary time because, I can't let my kids go to the grocery store with me. I can't let my kids leave the car if we go to get takeout,
Yeah, we're really lucky in the fact that our son's in kindergarten, so homeschooling isn't really, it's not that hard.
It is stressful though, because I have to say, there's still things that he has to do.
Sure, I'm just saying,
yeah,
we're not having to do trigonometry.
No,
so it's like learning to read. It's the stuff that we do with him already, anyways. So at least we have that, and that is we're fortunate to have that. But
yeah,
some of our friends that have teenagers, and they're having to
be a teacher,
homeschool them with high school stuff, spur of the moment, ready, go. And you may or may not have a job, and balancing now on, having to be forced into homeschool, forced into, balancing your job with your life.
Yeah, that's what I kind of wanted to share. I had a really bad day on Tuesday because it became kind of mandated that we need to start doing some projects online through Merrick's school. And I was also making cold calls for the side hustle. And I was also taking calls for my current job, still dealing with what's to come. And so I literally had Remy screaming, my mom kind of annoyed with me because we had to have a call with Merrick's teacher, and I'm on another call with my old boss. And then I have calls coming in for my new place, my new job, or my new hustle. And I was literally I can't do it all. I can't do it all. You got to go with Merrick and do his school, Mom, because I can't do all of this. Or Merrick just won't do it today, and we'll do it tonight, So there's just some compromises that everybody's going to have to make. And I've always said this, I said this to you when I was in college, there's just too much sometimes. And so a ball is going to be on the ground, and you have to pick which ball is that that's going to be on the ground. Is it your kid and his learning, or is it your new job potential that could be what keeps you afloat in the next 10 months? Or is it your old job that you don't really care about anymore? You know what I mean?
That isn't paying you?
Yeah, that isn't paying you, and they're wasting your time and your energy and your emotions. They're draining you, vacuuming you. But yeah, so that's been my week, is figuring out which ball is going to be on the ground and how long is it going to stay on the ground.
Yeah.
And what am I going to pick it up, and what am I going to throw it back up in the air?
Yeah.
Get it back in the cycle. And I think everybody has to kind of see life that way right now, because you can't juggle it all. You can't take on being a stay-at-home teacher, and you cannot think that they're going to get, 100% of the attention that they deserve or need right now. And you can't dedicate 100% of the attention that you personally deserve or need right now and all the time. But you certainly need to fit it in there and figure it out. And figure out which one sticks and which one's gonna have to drop for the day. And
I think the biggest thing with that, especially or in the moment, it's obviously you have to deal with it as best you can. But as we know what the new normal's starting to look like, we have to be able to create a schedule and map out your day. And so, from this time to this time, you're handling this stuff, and from homeschool can be at 6 o'clock.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be at noon. It doesn't have to be at 8 a.m. And, we can handle it then. And there's we're fortunate to where we have our mother-in-law or my mother-in-law that lives with us. Mm-hmm. But there's 3 of us.
Yeah.
So in some homes there's 2 or there's 1.
Yeah.
And they don't have the ability to do that. But if you create a schedule, if you understand what your day is going to look like, it's easier to be more successful in that setting, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I think having some sort of schedule is important. I unfortunately had no fucking clue where to start this week. Come Monday, I'm getting up at 5 a.m. I'm working with my Michigan clients, my East Coast clients, and hustling as much as I can. As soon as 2 p.m. hits, I'm shutting it down and spending time with my family. And that's just it. It's 5 to 2, we're done. even though I love sleeping in. So 5 a.m. is going to come real hard.
Unless we get California clients and then it's 5
a.m. Yeah. I mean, then California Hustle has to start, which it actually I think is going to start picking up next week. So we'll see. And then you also have to fit in like how much more cold calling should I be doing? Because we can only really manage so much. So it's like all of a sudden when you're getting ping, 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 you're like, should I stop cold calling? Because I can't even manage what we have right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Or
you stopped.
Do I keep going just in case some of the shit falls through? It's like a bad boyfriend. You're like, okay, should I get on a dating app just in case this fucking fails, just so I have a backup plan? I don't know. That's a bad joke, but
no, that's pretty funny.
Never you never thought like that? Like,
no.
I always used to think like that when I was younger. Like,
if I had to worry about a girlfriend that I just signed up, I needed to sign up for a dating app in case it didn't work out. I just didn't date that girl.
No, here's the theory on it.
I know what you're saying.
Hear me out.
Totally.
You're not a woman. So to all the ladies out there, sometimes, and I'm sure you're all laughing right now, sometimes if you know you've got a side hustle or a side gig, meaning a man, locked and loaded just in case this douchebag falls through, you're not so desperate. You don't call them when they don't call you. You don't chase after them. You're like, all right, whatever. They chase you and they can smell it. They can smell it when you got someone locked and loaded in the back. So anyways, a little trick out there for the single ladies. If you don't want to be desperate or come across like you need that person, get someone locked and loaded in the back. Anyways, that's a little advertisement for dating apps out there.
That's crazy.
It's reality, bro. That's how everybody should look at life.
Anyways, I think this is a good place to
end it.
To wrap this up.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. The hustle we speak of is Sway Collective.
Yeah,
you can check us out. And
give us a tap, give us a like.
Yeah, if you're interested in any of these, any promotional gear or in need of any of these medical supplies, give us an email at contact@sway-collective.com.
Yeah. So that is just a segue also out of this and kind of plug our business. It's really interesting because now the governor has mandated that everybody needs a mask. So there's some really amazing things happening in my industry where people are starting to make masks. And if you guys need 3-ply masks, we can do as little as I think we can do 100 as a minimum for masks. So if anyone needs a mask, you can hit me up and either we could help you out, or I have a lot of other companies that are supplying really awesome masks made out of old swim fabric and whatnot. So that I'm still connected to. So obviously I don't work for them, but I could help you get in contact. So
yeah, no, some of the American manufacturers have answered the call.
Yeah.
And they're pivoting and they're keeping their business afloat. They're paying their employees and they're giving the Americans what they need. And that's awesome.
So fresh. It's so rad that people are doing that right now. I think that's honestly, any company that's doing that is a company I would want to work for.
Well, it makes you proud.
Yeah.
Them.
So American. It's the most American thing.
When you don't know them,
yeah,
they may even be your competitor.
Yeah,
but
they are. Yeah.
You're proud.
Yeah.
That they are an American business and that they are providing jobs, that they are a secure enough entity that is taking care of the families that depend on that product.
Yep. Yeah, there's no agenda. It's just literally and the coolest part about, Raj specifically I'm plugging right now just because I think the coolest part about them, and if you need a mask, go to swimspot.com. They're $1 a piece. And the raddest part about them is they are using old swim fabric. So they're recycling. They are keeping their employees paid. And they're keeping people safe and healthy. So I think it's just a 3-prong amazingness. So anyways, on that note, I think that's it. Do we have any more plugs for our friends?
Yeah. We just got a website out. So link is in our Instagram and Facebook. So check it out.
Awesome.
Have a good night.
Good night.